Ms. Grace, I'll remind you that you're under oath.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Alex Grace.
Ms. Grace, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I fell in love with acting when I was in the 6th grade and I got my first big role in The Wizard of Oz. I played Dorothy and I fell in love from the beginning, you know? Before I knew it, I was clicking my heels and dreaming of Hollywood. That's when I knew I was going to end up on Broadway.
What was the next step in your career?
Well, with a lot of hard work from my parents and my acting coach, I eventually did reach my goals. I was on Broadway, I toured nationally for a few years, and then I made the progression into the movie industry. That's actually when I met the love of my life, Jackie. We started living together, and eventually we decided that it was the right thing to make the move to Midlands. I started working less as an actress and more as a businesswoman with MTS. I was not only the star of the show, Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace, but I was also an executive producer.
Ms. Grace, what was Midlands After Dark?
Well, Midlands After Dark was a talk show, like The Late Show or The Tonight Show. We had different guests on, and they would do different bits with me. We would do interviews, we would have musicians on, live performances, that kind of thing.
Did you have a staff to assist you on Midlands After Dark?
Yes, of course. I had an excellent staff. In fact, our resounding success would not have been possible without them.
Ms. Grace, how are the ratings on your show?
At first, our first season, very good. It was something I was extremely proud of, and of course we wouldn't have gotten to that place without our excellent staff and crew. Eventually, in 2017, our ratings started to dip, but that was due to the fact that MTS hadn't really given us a primetime spot. That was going to change before Danny Kosak came on our show.
What happened when Danny Kozak came on your show?
Well, Danny Kosak's chimpanzee, Elias, mauled my writer, Chris Filifana, to death, right next to me. And Kosak just stood there. He did absolutely nothing to stop the attack.
How did Danny Kozak become a guest on your show?
Well, Kosak had been emailing me for years. And eventually, I thought that it was time to give him a shot after I saw one of my interns watching a video of his chimpanzee, Elias. I figured, it's about time. We'll give this guy a shot. But I put him in contact with Jameson, our talent booker, and he accepted our request to be on the show. But that's when things started to get a little weird.
What happened?
Well, he emailed me back directly and asked if he could bring different animals on the show. But the thing about that was the animals he offered to bring were more dangerous. I wasn't comfortable with that, so I told him that Elias is who he should have brought. But then what happened was I didn't hear back from him again. He basically only contacted Jameson after that.
Ms. Grace, you mentioned that you were concerned with safety. What kind of precautions did you take before bringing on a wild animal to your set?
Yeah, of course. I made sure to read industry standard articles about the way that they have to do things in our organization, I also made sure to ensure that that all of the guidelines that Danny Kosak sent me were emailed out to our crew. Every person who was on set that evening or that day got those guidelines. We also made sure to hang flyers around the studio saying that there was going to be a live animal on set.
Approaching opposing counsel with 3 copies of Exhibit 23. Permission to approach the witness the same.
You may.
Your Honor, would you like a courtesy copy?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Ms. Grace, what have I just handed you?
These are the guidelines that I sent out to every crew member on our set.
Ms. Grace, did you read these guidelines?
Of course I did, and I followed them to a T.
Plaintiff moves Exhibit 23 into evidence.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor.
All right, with no objections, Exhibit 23 will be received from the evidence.
Ms. Grace, I want to talk a little bit more now about what happened on the day of June 29th. How did that day begin?
Well, I actually woke up to the sound of blood-curdling screams. You see, Elias the chimpanzee was already on set and already throwing a tantrum. That's when our writer, Chris Villafana, came in to tell me that Kosak had arrived. I started to get ready for the day, and then I went in to talk to Danny Kosak about what was going on.
And what did you two talk about?
Well, when I walked in, Kosak greeted me and just kept saying how thankful he was to be on the show. And, of course I understand that. But then he started to say things about the fact that he was losing a lot of money and that he didn't think his animal sanctuary was going to make it. I could tell he was nervous, so I just tried to get him to talk about something else. But that's when I saw scratch marks up and down his arms.
Did you ask about those scratch marks?
I did, and I even tried to calm him down. I said, well, I hope Elias didn't do that to you. And that's when he reacted kind of weird. He looked at me and he said, why would you say that? And when he did that, I got a little nervous. I don't know.
And what happened after you asked about that?
Well, I tried to calm him down and we moved on to talking about other things. Just getting acquainted, making sure that if he needed anything, he knew who to go to.
Did you talk at all about your plans for the interview?
Yes, we did. That's what I moved on to. Elias, when I walked towards him, he started screaming again. And that's when I asked Kosak if he was okay. And Kosak told me that he was. And I decided that, with how nervous he seemed, I would just leave it alone. I didn't want to get into a touchy situation with him anymore.
All right, Ms. Grace, I want to move on to what happened during the rehearsal. How did the rehearsal begin?
Well, I got there at around 2:30 and I started rehearsing some of my monologue material. That's actually why our writer, Chris Villafana, was on set that day.
And what did you do after your monologue?
I invited Danny and the chimpanzee on stage. They came on. I shook Danny's hand first, and then with his prompting, he allowed me to shake the chimpanzee's hand. I led them back to my desk, and we all sat down.
What happened after that?
Well, I started talking to Danny about what he did, the animal sanctuary, asking him some basic questions about the chimpanzee. Eventually, he left the stage as we'd previously planned, and I started to have a conversation with Elias, where the chimpanzee would nod back to me when I would ask him questions.
Did Elias's behavior change after Danny Kosak left the stage?
At first, no. For maybe the first 2 minutes, things were going great. It was really funny. There wasn't anyone in the audience, but even the people on set were laughing. It was a great bit. But then, all of a sudden, out of completely nowhere, Elias stood up. He started screaming bloody murder, and he was jumping up and down on his chair.
What happened after that?
That's when I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there staring at this animal that seemed to be getting even more and more angry. I didn't move. I didn't do anything. I just looked at Kosak, and he wasn't doing anything either. He was frozen. He wasn't handling the situation.
What happened to the chimpanzee after that?
Eventually, I ducked down under my desk, and that's when the chimpanzee leapt off his chair, and he made his way over to Chris Villafana.
And what happened after the chimpanzee went to Chris?
He started screaming. He was begging for someone to come help him. I was so scared. I just kept hearing his screams and his pleas for help, but Kosak still wasn't doing anything. Kosak wasn't helping him.
Thank you, Ms. Grace. Nothing further. Permission to retrieve evidence under the bench.
I have a courtesy copy, so you can constructively order to the jury.
Constructively.
Oh, okay.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Mrs. Grace.
Good morning.
To begin with, I'd like to talk to you about your recent experiences in show business. Is it true that your most recent movie, Rocking Leo, barely made its budget back?
That was as planned, but yes, that is correct. It was just a way to get people to realize like what I was doing in the industry. It wasn't supposed to be a huge blockbuster film.
But it barely made its budget back.
It was just a media stunt, really, but sure.
And then after that, you moved to television, right?
Yes, I did.
And that's when you started Cooking with Alex Grace.
Yeah, that was the first show I had with MTS, but eventually we decided, since there was another cooking show in Midlands, it was great to make the switch over to a late night talk show.
But a contributing factor in that decision must have been that it was suffering from low ratings, right?
Like I said, we had another competitor in the industry, but this late night talk show was really where we were going to make our statement.
But it was canceled ultimately because it wasn't performing better than the other show, correct?
The cooking show, is that what you're...
Yes, the cooking show.
Yeah, it was canceled. We decided that it was right to make the switch.
So then you moved to Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. And as you testified, that started to have its ratings dip.
Well, yes, it did, but that's extremely normal for a second season of a television show. We needed a new spot, which MTS was going to give us before this whole incident occurred.
But this wasn't the second season of Midlands After Dark. It was only the second season of Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So the show had existed beforehand, just with a different host, and had its ratings fine before that.
Yes, that's correct, but as I stated previously, we needed to make this shift over. It was about the spot that we had and really the coverage we were getting from MTS. We were planning on doing things in order to make our ratings recover.
However, while that spot worked for other hosts, it didn't work for you.
Objection, Your Honor. Live foundation. May I be heard?
Sure.
Opposing counsel has laid no foundation that Miss Grace knows what the ratings of the shows for Midlands After Dark was before she took over.
Response?
Your Honor, it's clearly been testified in the direct that she had part ownership in Midlands Television Studios, so clearly she knew how the shows were performing, even before she was host of Midlands After Dark.
Can you just ask her a basic foundation question to see if she knows what the ratings were beforehand? And if she says that she knows what the ratings were beforehand, then I'm comfortable line of question and continue.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
As you owned part ownership in Midlands Television Studios, were you aware of what the ratings of other shows were while you were in this role?
I didn't know what the ratings of the shows were before I started working there now.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk to you more about what was happening leading up to what took place on the day of the attack.
Sure.
So, you received these guidelines from Danny Kosak, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you sent them out to your staff.
Yes, I did. I sent them out to every staff member that worked on our crew, and they were expected to read them. I'm sure that they did, because that's their job. That's what they're there for.
But did you ever ask them if they read them?
I didn't have to. That's what my crew members are supposed to do. They know that any email that they get from me is extremely important.
But doesn't Rule 15 of the guidelines state that you need to make sure everyone has read them?
Which I did by sending out the email, and then Jameson Clark actually had a meeting later that week in order to ensure that the staff, any questions that they had, could be answered by him.
Were you at that meeting?
No, I wasn't. That's something that I allowed Jameson to do.
Okay. So you're not sure how much the guidelines were discussed and how in depth they were discussed?
Well, that was the objective of the meeting, to discuss the guidelines, so I assume that's what they did.
But you still weren't present at that meeting?
No, I was not. I can't micromanage everything my staff and crew do. They're excellent, and up until this point, I have no reason to believe that they didn't do what they were supposed to.
And were you involved in any safety checks before the show took place, the rehearsal took place?
Me, not specifically. That's something else that is expected of my crew to do, and I'm sure that they did.
And you had fallen asleep at your desk the night before this filming took place, right?
It's actually funny you should mention that, yeah. I was up all night filling out important paperwork that I needed to get done.
And while you were at your desk, you had an intern go out and buy a bottle of wine, correct?
Yeah, for a party that my husband was going to.
But can you testify that the bottle of wine ended up at that party that weekend?
I don't know, it got to my husband, and I don't know what he did with it.
Okay. Now I'd like to talk to you about what happened at the rehearsal itself. So Elias jumped up and had this startle reaction, correct?
Yeah, I guess Elias jumped up. I don't know the terminology for it.
And then when he started screaming and lunged towards Chris Villafana, you hid under your desk, correct?
Yeah, I was frozen for a minute. I didn't know what to do. I'd never seen anything like this happen before. But yeah, eventually I hid under my desk and he jumped off his chair.
So you couldn't see everything that happened, right?
I was peeking my head out, yeah, but I guess, yeah, it's possible to say that I didn't see.
Also, on your show, you have a history of springing unexpected surprise questions on guests, right?
Yeah, in the past, that's something that we've done.
Also, you've stated yourself that controversy brings nice publicity, right?
It, of course, depends on the controversy, but yeah, that's something I've said in the past.
All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
Review direct?
No, Your Honor, just ask that my witness be allowed to step in.
All right, witness